was the winter of 1975 when the Lutz family packed up their lives and moved into a quiet street in Amityville, New York. To the neighbors, it seemed like any other house on the block. Neat lawns, white picket fences, a chimney that puffed soft smoke into the cold air. But for the Lutz family, there was something off. They had driven past the house countless times before, unaware of its history. The neighborhood was friendly, the streets empty at night, but the moment they crossed the threshold of 112 Ocean Avenue, the house seemed alive. Doors groaned as if settling. The air felt heavier than it should, colder than the winter outside, and shadows stretched oddly across the walls. His parents tried to dismiss it. New house nerves, they said. But the house had a way of making them all uneasy. At night, Daniel would wake up screaming from dreams that left him trembling and wide-eyed, insisting he wasn't alone. Objects shifted slightly, small things at first. A cup on the counter facing the wrong way, a book fallen to the floor. No one spoke about it, yet each of them felt the same prickling sensation of being watched. They told themselves it was just the new house, the strange creaks of old walls, a child's imagination. But deep down, a quiet dread began to grow. These were only the first signs. The darkness that had haunted the house for years was awakening, and it had its eyes on Daniel. Days passed, and the strange occurrences grew bolder. Daniel began talking to someone no one could see. At first, it was quiet murmurs in his room, his small lips moving in words that made no sense. When his mother asked him who he was speaking to, he would look at her with wide, frightened eyes and whisper, "No one, but they're here." At night, the family would wake to doors swinging open on their own, objects falling without cause, and the unmistakable feeling that someone was in the house with them. Daniel's laughter, once bright and innocent, became hollow, echoing in the hallways long after he had stopped. His father swore he heard Daniel's voice coming from the kitchen, though the boy was asleep in his room. One evening, while unpacking boxes, Daniel suddenly stopped and stared at the corner of the living room. His eyes were wide, his body rigid. "They're watching me," he whispered. His parents tried to reassure him, but the air seemed to grow colder around them, and the shadows on the walls. They moved as if alive. Then came the voices, soft at first, like a breeze, whispering his name. But soon they became clearer, commanding and angry. Daniel began speaking words he had never learned, phrases in languages his parents did not recognize. At times, his small body would jerk violently, his head twisting in impossible ways. They knew, even if they did not yet understand, something dark had entered their home, and it had claimed their son. No priest, no neighbor, no friend could explain what was happening. The house seemed to breathe with a life of its own, and Daniel, well, he was no longer entirely Daniel. And so, the family waited, trapped in a nightmare that was only beginning, unaware that their son's soul was slowly being overtaken by something far older and far more malevolent than any of them could imagine. By the third week in the house, the Lutz family could no longer deny it. Daniel's small body no longer felt like their son's. His voice had changed, guttural, deep, and commanding. Words poured from him that no child should know, languages learned from some dark, unseen source. Objects began to move violently, Chairs toppled across rooms, doors slammed shut on their own, and pictures fell from walls with such force that the glass shattered. Even the air seemed charged. The family could feel the temperature drop drastically in seconds, frost forming on the window panes as if winter itself had entered the living room. One night, Daniel's mother awoke to find him hovering above his bed, his body rigid, arms outstretched, eyes rolled back. A low, guttural voice echoed from him. "You will leave. This is mine." She screamed, and Daniel fell back into his mattress, shaking violently, sweat and tears streaming down his face. Terrified and desperate, the Lutz family reached out to every priest they could find, pleading for someone to save their son. One by one, each rejected them, shaken by the stories of the house and the darkness that had claimed Daniel. Fear had taken hold even of the devout, all except one. The priest arrived at the house, a solitary figure in the freezing night, carrying nothing but prayers, holy water, and an unshakable resolve. As he stepped into Daniel's room, the air thickened, the shadows deepened, and the house seemed to draw its breath in anticipation. Then the ritual began. Daniel's small frame lifted from the floor, hovering unnaturally in midair, his body twisting and contorting as guttural, unfathomable words spilled from his mouth. The walls shook, candles flickered violently, and the very air pulsed with a malevolent force, as if the house itself were alive and enraged. The priest's voice rose, commanding and resolute, every prayer a blade striking the darkness. Finally, with a last, desperate roar of will, the presence relinquished its hold. Daniel crashed to the floor with a massive thud, gasping and trembling, free at last as silence descended over the room, thick and heavy, like a reclaimed breath. Finally, after 28 harrowing days, the Lutz family abandoned the house under the cover of darkness, fleeing with nothing but their lives. Furniture remained overturned, belongings scattered, and memories left to rot in the rooms that had become a prison of malevolence. The wind whispered through the empty halls as if mourning their departure. Neighbors, in the days that followed, spoke of shadows moving behind curtained windows, lights flickering violently in rooms that should have been dark, and, most chilling of all, the unmistakable sound of a child's voice, deep, guttural, and otherworldly, echoing through the empty halls, as though Daniel himself still lingered, or something far darker wearing his face.